Ralph received the order to transfer for his solo assignment. At first, he diligently came back home, but lately, he's been distant. On Mark's birthday, we had planned to go to the amusement park, but he called to say he had to work. Listening to Mark's wish to see her dad, we went to Ralph's new location and found him holding a strange child, looking quite cozy with a woman. They looked like a family. When Ralph saw me, his face turned pale, and he stopped. I lowered my eyes and said, "Sorry for disturbing your happiness."
"No, it's not what it looks like. There's a deep reason for this,"
Ralph stammered.
"My mom introduced us. She said Linda was better suited for me than Sabrina. I couldn't refuse."
"So you were out with her on Mark's birthday?"
"Don't be ridiculous." "Huh? Is today the birthday?"
Ralph's cluelessness disgusted me. "Let's go, Mark." I was fuming inside. I won't let this slide. My mother-in-law and Ralph. You'll see. I'm Sabrina, a full-time worker. Ralph and I met again at work 5 years ago, after being in the same college, and we started dating and got married. Ralph, with his handsome looks and gentle demeanor, was always surrounded by friends in college. Back then, he was out of reach, someone you couldn't casually approach. So, when he came to support my department at the company's headquarters, my heart skipped a beat. I remember being so happy when we were assigned to work on the same team. We became close, started dating, and got married. But our happy married life ended abruptly. After Ralph lost his father in adulthood, he lived with his mother, even after getting a job, to look after her. Even after we started living in the condo I bought when I was single, he frequently visited his mother to shop or chat with her. Eventually, I started to feel uneasy and asked Ralph, "Ralph, are you thinking about living with your mom someday?" Ralph waved his hand with a smile. "No way, not at all. Mom likes her freedom too much for that." "I see." I felt relieved as he continued. "So I gave her a spare key. She said she wanted to come over whenever she felt like it." "Really? Huh, was that not okay?" Ralph looked puzzled, and I wanted to hold my head in frustration.
"Why do you do things without asking?"
"What, is it bad?" "It's my room, isn't it?" Ralph pouted.
"It's in my name. I bought it with my grandma's inheritance."
"Well, whatever." He muttered, annoyed. "This is troubling, I can't exactly ask for the key back now. I can easily imagine what will happen next." And sure enough, my mother-in-law started making unannounced visits repeatedly. After our marriage, Ralph returned to work at the headquarters and often worked late, coming home later than me, who worked at a branch office. Anticipating this, my mother-in-law started showing up around my return time. When I dragged myself home, exhausted, and saw her car in the parking lot, my fatigue doubled. "Welcome home, Sabrina." "Good evening." I responded with a forced smile to my mother-in-law, who was lounging on the living room sofa as if it were her own. "Dinner's ready. Let's eat together when Ralph gets home."
"Yes." "Wait, didn't I make meatballs and salad?"
I asked, and she replied with a smile. "Oh, I threw them out. They looked unappetizing." I rushed to the trash can to find the dinner I had gotten up at 4:30 to make had been thrown away. Not again, I thought, feeling disheartened. Because, it's unsanitary to let Ralph eat something made hours ago. It has to be freshly made. Suppressing my anger, I spoke to my grinning mother-in-law.
"I've told you before, right? If you're coming over, let me know the day before. Wasting time and ingredients like this has to stop."
"That's impossible. I just get the sudden urge to see Ralph's face." She twisted her body. "And Ralph loves my cooking. It's a perfect surprise, don't you think?" She declared proudly, leaving me too tired to argue further. Of course, Ralph didn't know my cooking was being thrown away. When Ralph got home, his mother eagerly set the table and watched intently as he took his first bite. "How's the beef stew today?" "It's great. I could eat asparagus and pumpkin salad all day." "Right? Have as much as you want." She glanced at me with a triumphant look. She's definitely competing with me. I fumed silently as Ralph ate his dinner, unaware of anything. I had confided in my sister-in-law once before. My cheerful and kind sister-in-law had been considerate of me since the beginning of my marriage, knowing how coldly my mother-in-law treated me.
I'm sorry. Our mom can be quite unpleasant, can't she? She's always been so obsessed with Ralph. If she ever causes you trouble, feel free to talk to me anytime.
She whispered to me during a party after the wedding. So I often vented to her when we ate together. Fortunately, I got pregnant soon after we got married, so my mother-in-law couldn't complain about that. However, her interference with me became even worse. For example, she would come over while I was bedridden with morning sickness and accuse me of just being lazy.
Feeling nauseous from morning sickness? It's all in your head. I was completely fine. You're not even sick, don't exaggerate.
She'd say, starting with such comments and continuing to nag about my cleaning and ironing skills.
Even if you feel bad, you should do your chores perfectly. Ralph is supporting you, isn't he? No, I work full-time too, so we split the chores. Our salaries are almost the same.
I protested gently, despite feeling nauseous. My mother-in-law would glare at me.
You make him do housework? Then why did you get married?
That's ridiculous. No matter how much I explained, it was a dead end. Eventually, I pretended to handle all the housework in front of my mother-in-law to keep the peace. I believe it was deliberate, but my mother-in-law continued to make meals with strong smells or fried food every day. Garlic-heavy steaks, fried chicken, pork cutlets, and the like. Unable to stand the smell of oil filling the house, I would throw up in the bathroom, and when I returned, my mother-in-law would look at me with tearful eyes.
Sabrina, how terrible. Do you hate my cooking so much that it makes you throw up? They say pregnancy changes your taste, but this is too much.
No, it's the smell of the oil that makes me sick. I'd explain, only for Ralph to scold me too.
You can eat even with morning sickness, right? It's disrespectful to waste the food mom made.
I was stunned by his words. He seemed kind, but I realized he lacked empathy. Even after my morning sickness subsided, my mother-in-law would come over to cook dinner for us under the pretense of supporting Sabrina. She would make an enormous amount of food and push it on me.
You have a baby, so you need to eat for 3. No, the doctor told me not to gain too much weight. I have a small appetite and avoid fatty meats.
I'd gently refuse, only for her to act dramatically sorrowful, as if the world were ending.
How awful. I'm thinking of your health, Sabrina. So what if we have fried food every day?
Ralph would naturally side with his mother.
Mom is trying to be considerate. Can't you see that? She's my mother, so treat her with a bit more respect.
Realizing I couldn't reason with them, I resorted to my last option. I asked the doctor to write a letter. Finally, after seeing it, my mother-in-law stopped her food assaults. After many disputes, the baby was born safely. Even though I had asked not to be disturbed in the hospital, Ralph broke the promise, and my mother-in-law rushed in joyfully right after the birth. My parents had also flown in to see the baby, but my mother-in-law, as usual, put me down.
Oh my, what a wrinkly, ugly child. Looks like a monkey, not cute at all.
My mother-in-law dismissed us with a bored comment, while Ralph responded with a laugh. My parents were wide-eyed. After Ralph saw his mother out to the door, my mom voiced her concern.
She is quite outspoken. Are you okay, Sabrina? Ralph's sister is very kind and helps me out a lot.
I replied with a forced smile.
Don't overdo it, okay? Yeah, thanks.
I felt guilty for worrying my parents, who lived far away. It's common for in-laws to become more intrusive after a grandchild is born. But in our case, it was the opposite. They visited less often. As he grew, our son Mark started to look a lot like me. Fair-skinned, big eyes, and curly hair. My mother-in-law didn't seem to like that and would complain whenever she came over.
That kid has such an ugly hairstyle. He's so pale he looks sick. Doesn't resemble Ralph at all. Is he really your child? Mom! Ralph finally reprimanded her. But my mother-in-law didn't seem inclined to change her attitude. When we asked her about the baby's party, she coldly replied, "Do it yourselves." After that, even when we went back for holidays, she only doted on Ralph and ignored Mark. When Mark approached her, she looked annoyed, and even when he called her grandma, she didn't seem pleased at all. Hey, Ralph. Why doesn't your mom show any affection for Mark? He's her grandchild. When I expressed my sadness, Ralph responded as if it were obvious. He's not her daughter's child, but her daughter-in-law's. That's just how it is. I understood his reasoning, but I still wished she would show some affection for Mark, even if only superficially. Ralph never tried to one-up me about income and always shared the housework fairly. If not for my mother-in-law, we would have gotten along perfectly. When Mark turned 2, Ralph was transferred to a different region. I considered going with him, but finding a full-time job with a young child was quite difficult. There were no openings at Ralph's new workplace. When we discussed this at his parents' house, his mother suggested Ralph go alone. You'll be back in 5 years, right? Then Ralph can go by himself. I was surprised and looked at her. I expected her to say, as his wife, you should go with him. Sabrina, you have a job, right? It would be a shame to waste the career you've built. Yes, but Ralph isn't good at cooking, even if he manages other chores. I'll be fine, Sabrina. There's a grocery store nearby, so I'll manage my meals. Ralph said with a smile, so we decided he would go alone. Ralph frequently came back to take Mark to the park, read him bedtime stories, and kept up the communication actively. I also made an effort to visit Ralph with Mark on the weekends, cooking meals and spending quality family time together. But about 6 months later, Ralph suddenly became distant. Even when he came home, he never put his phone down, only giving half-hearted responses when Mark talked to him. When Mark asked, "Daddy, let's play with the train," he would hand her a tablet to watch videos while he smirked at his phone. Is Daddy tired from work? I was really looking forward to playing with him. Mark said sadly, which broke my heart. After putting Mark to bed, I confronted Ralph, and for once, he pushed back. Let me relax when I come home. If you're gonna complain, I won't come back at all. Don't say that. Mark was so looking forward to playing with you. I pleaded sincerely, but Ralph just made a face and clicked his tongue. Yeah. I'll play with him next time. Is that good enough? His dismissive attitude infuriated me, but I held back my anger, worried he'd really stop coming home. This pattern repeated many times over the next year, and both Mark and I began to feel disappointed in Ralph. Then, one day, I got a message from Ralph. Sorry, I can't come tomorrow. Tomorrow was Mark's 4th birthday, and we had planned to go to the amusement park as a family. Did something happen? I asked, worried, and got a reply. I have to work tomorrow. I won't be back until evening. If it's work, it can't be helped. We'll celebrate another time. I replied through the messaging app. On the way home from picking Mark up from daycare, I told her the news, and he was crestfallen. I wanted to see Daddy, even if just for a moment. Seeing her on the verge of tears was heart-wrenching. How about we go see him, even if we can't play? I suggested, and Mark's face lit up. Really? We'll just say hi and then come back. Yay! His excitement made me smile. I decided to surprise Ralph by showing up unannounced. We could meet him after work. Even though he'd been distant lately, surely he'd be happy to see Mark waiting for him outside his place. Suppressing my own excitement, I took Mark on the flight to Ralph's place. We arrived at the closest station and walked to the condo he had rented. As we waited in the park in front of the condo, I heard Ralph's voice from around the corner. Mark, Daddy's here. Really? We stepped out onto the sidewalk. I was about to wave at Ralph when I froze. Ralph was holding a boy who looked about 1 year old. Standing beside him was a woman who looked like the boy's mother.
Daddy, I'm hungry. Yeah, I'm hungry too. Let's have Mom's burgers when we get home. Okay. It was clear they were a family returning from a famous theme park, wearing matching character hats. Ralph turned pale when he noticed me and stopped. The woman beside him also saw me and gasped. She seemed to know Ralph was married. An awkward silence hung between us. After a moment, I broke the silence. So, you've been having fun here. Sorry to interrupt your happiness. No, it's not what it looks like. There's a deep reason for this. Ralph stammered. My mom introduced me to her. She said Linda was better suited for me than Sabrina. I couldn't refuse. So you skipped Mark's birthday celebration to go out with her? Don't be ridiculous. Huh? Was today his birthday? Ralph's cluelessness disgusted me. Let's go, Mark. I took Mark's hand and headed back to the station. I was furious. Not only had he cheated and fathered a secret child, but he also missed his own child's birthday to be with his mistress and the other child. I was boiling with anger. Fine, I'll raise Mark on my own. But I'm not letting this slide. Ralph and his mother. They will pay for this. Mommy, who was the kid Daddy was holding? Maybe a friend's child? On the way back, I couldn't tell Mark the truth and just gave her a vague smile. But that kid called him Daddy. He's my daddy. It's weird. I held back my tears, barely managing to keep it together. How hurt would Mark be if he knew the truth? I bought some sandwiches on the way. I planned to eat Mark's leftovers, but I had no appetite and threw the rest in the trash along with the bottle. Back home, after putting Mark to bed, I went to the living room and finally let my pent-up emotions out in a flood of tears. I closed the door so as not to wake Mark and cried my heart out. I'd heard stories about husbands cheating during solo assignments, but I never thought it would happen to me. And his reason? My mom recommended it. It made no sense. Unable to sleep, I spent the night thinking. In the morning, during a break at work, I contacted a lawyer to start divorce process. I'll be filing for child support through a lawyer. I wrote a note and sent it to Ralph. Once my application was approved, I took paid leave the next day and got a moving estimate. I dropped Mark off at daycare, packed up our things in boxes, and moved to a rental condo I had lined up. It was a temporary place until I could sign a lease for a new house. Ralph sent a barrage of messages, but I read them all without responding. They were all excuses. He didn't seem to plan on apologizing at this point. He also kept calling, but the voicemails he left were just more excuses. I was lonely. It's hard to say no to my mom. You understand, right? I didn't mean to have a kid with her. About 6 months passed with no response from me. One day, while Mark and I were playing with toy cars, the doorbell rang. When I checked the intercom screen, there was Ralph, crying. I had told my sister-in-law about the situation recently. Last night, she told me she had given Ralph my new address, so I figured he'd show up soon. On the screen, Ralph's face was a mess of tears and snot. His usually handsome face was ruined. When I let him in, he clung to me, pleading in a tearful voice. Please, pay the mortgage. If you don't, I'll lose the house by the time I return to the main office. That sounds tough. I brushed him off, and he glared at me with bloodshot eyes, raising his voice. Don't talk like it's not your problem. The bank sent a foreclosure notice. If I don't pay, they'll demand the remaining balance in full, and I can't handle that suddenly. He dropped to his knees, wiping his tears with the back of his hand. I plan to bring Mom to live with us eventually. Now everything's ruined. Funny, you swore you wouldn't live with her. I said, shrugging my shoulders. It's not sudden. You must have received several warnings by now. I thought you'd pay, so I ignored them. Then it's your own fault. I said coldly, and Ralph lashed out at me. How did the house end up in my name? I can't pay $4,000 a month on my salary. Foreclosure and auction? That's insane. Ralph was whining like a child about a natural consequence. There was no other way. I explained calmly. I could have kicked you out, but your mom has a spare key. If you want to keep living there, pay the mortgage. If not, find another place. I can't do that. I promised Linda we'd live in a high-rise condo when I got back. There's no way I can afford a place like that on my salary. He muttered. He's a timid, easily swayed, and vain man, which makes him quite troublesome. Please, Sabrina, keep paying the mortgage like before. Ralph begged me. You've got an inheritance from your grandma, right? You can easily cover the mortgage. Help me out, we're married. Are you kidding me? I shouted in anger, glaring at Ralph. You cheated on me, had a kid with your mistress, and now you want me to pay the mortgage so you can live with her? How selfish can you be? Look, I just did what my mom asked. The kid wasn't planned. What was I supposed to do? He scratched the back of his head, looking sullen. It's your rebellious attitude that makes my mom dislike you, you know? Shut up. Get out. I pushed Ralph out of the room and shut the door. Fine. I'll just tell Linda the truth and sell the place, okay? You're so stingy, Sabrina. Ralph cursed under his breath and left. The following weekend, I invited Ralph, his mother, and Linda. I called them to the condo because I had something important to discuss. His mother and Linda arrived, looking around the room with disdain before laughing mockingly. What a shabby place. This tacky condo suits her perfectly. Come on, Linda, don't say it out loud, even if it's true. Hey, cut it out. Ignoring their giggles, I deliberately addressed Ralph. By the way, I'm glad we sold the house we used to live in. Paying $4,000 a month was tough. I was considering buying it back myself. Hearing this, his mother and Linda looked shocked. Clearly, Ralph had kept this from them. What? I thought Ralph was paying for it. No, you see, Sabrina has an inheritance. Oh, that's right. You married her for the money, didn't you? Linda sneered. Did you know that, Sabrina? The only reason Ralph married you was because of your inheritance. Don't think it was because of your charm. I shifted my gaze from Linda to Ralph, who looked away, confirming her words. I wasn't hurt anymore. My opinion of Ralph couldn't sink any lower. So, why did you call us here? Linda and Ralph are busy, unlike you. Ralph should know the reason best. It's about child support payments. You received the letter, right? Ralph's face twitched. Oh, that. It's been 6 months since the divorce, and you keep dodging the issue. You even missed our scheduled meetings. I will be taking this to civil court soon. Despite my stern tone, Ralph grinned. I'm still negotiating the amount with my lawyer. Just give me a bit more time. Is that all? No, let's get to the main point. I fixed my gaze on his mother, who yawned in boredom, and asked firmly. Ralph, I heard you met Linda through you. Is that true? My mother-in-law raised her chin, answering with annoyance. Yes, it's true. Why would you do such a thing? Because I hate you, obviously. She sneered, spitting out her words. Even though I expected this answer, the bluntness still hurt. Ignoring my feelings, she continued her verbal attack. Your kid is ugly like you and doesn't warm up to me at all. If you shoo him away like a stray dog whenever he tries to talk to you, of course he won't warm up to you. She ignored my protest and smirked at Linda. When I met Linda at the store where Ralph works, I thought she was a better match for him. Ralph is amazing, so I didn't mind that he was married. No kidding. Ralph laughed awkwardly but quickly stopped when he met my eyes. I took a deep breath and muttered with frustration. Ralph is at fault for having an affair, but what kind of parent encourages their child to cheat? If I don't like the wife, it's only natural to find someone better. She said this as if it were obvious. But I told him to hurry up and get divorced, and he hesitated because Mark was young. My mother-in-law sighed as if Ralph was the unreasonable one. I started to question if I was the one in the wrong. Then, emboldened, Linda spoke up smugly. It's weird to leave your husband alone. You should have moved in with him.
Yeah, exactly.
Ralph leaned forward, gaining confidence from their support. It's Sabrina's fault for not coming with me. A wife should quit her job and follow her husband. Men are sensitive. If you leave them alone, of course they'll cheat. I was speechless. Ralph had such outdated views? Your mom told me not to move. She said it would be a waste to lose my career. I was testing your loyalty. A good wife would have gone anyway. I definitely would have. Linda added, grinning. Basically, Ralph and I are meant to be together. Funny, I thought you felt that way about your ex-husband. I said, showing a photo, and Linda's smile vanished. Quite cozy with him, considering you were seeing Ralph at the time.
What?
Ralph and his mother were shocked.
Linda, you've been married before? You said you were single.
Ralph and his mother looked at the photo I showed them and turned pale. No wonder. It showed Linda and a man getting cozy and entering a hotel together. Linda panicked, hastily trying to explain.
I was shopping with a friend, felt sick, so we rested at a hotel. That's all. There's no proof we did anything.
There was no proof, but her high-pitched, desperate tone was as good as an admission.
That child is definitely Ralph's, right? Did you get a DNA test?
Linda's shoulders jumped.
We don't need that. Of course, he's Ralph's kid.
Ralph suddenly remembered something.
When we checked the blood type, it was A. It's a type we couldn't have, but the nurse said it might change, so I was relieved.
Watching Linda tremble, Ralph sighed.
We should probably get a DNA test. Yeah, Ralph.
Linda choked up. Then suddenly, she shifted her anger towards me. Shouting. Why do you have these photos? This is absurd. They're fake. They're real. I hired a detective. The door opened, and Ralph's sister walked in. Ralph and his mother stared at her, mouths agape.
What are you doing here? What?
I heard everyone would be here today. After putting Mark to bed, I listened from the next room. She gave Ralph and his mother a brief glare, then turned to Linda with a smile. Long time no see. Since you broke off my engagement by stealing my fiancé?
So, you're Ralph's sister.
Linda glared at her, frustration clear on her face.
He dumped both of us and ran off, right? It's over.
Yes, but the fallout isn't. Ralph's sister spoke to Linda with intimidating authority. You always want what belongs to others. Pathetic. With her arms crossed, she turned to Ralph and their mother. Mom, Ralph, it's pitiful how you're letting this woman manipulate you. Treat Sabrina better. Her disappointed tone made Ralph look down awkwardly, but his mother pouted and snapped back.
Linda is better for Ralph. She's younger, cuter, and a better conversationalist.
Ralph's mother, whining like a spoiled child, suddenly realized something. If that kid isn't my grandchild, I've been giving money to someone else's kid?
What? Mom, you've been giving her money?
Ralph and his sister confronted her.
How much?
With a timid glance at Ralph and his sister, their mother confessed in a barely audible voice. Around $40,000.
$40,000!
I shouted involuntarily. Ralph and his sister recoiled in shock.
You've got to be kidding! Oh my!
Ralph checked his phone with a sudden realization and groaned.
Mom, did you use my card without asking?
Well, I live on a pension. I don't have that kind of money. Their mother replied defiantly. I thought it was okay since it's your kid. Why didn't you talk to me about it? Linda told me to keep it a secret from you. Ralph slumped, staring at his phone. His sister ran her hands through her hair in frustration. Meanwhile, Linda, who had quietly packed up, was sneaking towards the door. Ralph's sister called after her. You're not getting away this time. You're gonna pay for this and my alimony. Yeah, we'll be taking this to court. Get ready. Linda fled without a word. Ralph and his mother tried to follow, but his sister grabbed them by their collars and dragged them back for a few hours of stern lecturing. A DNA test on Linda's child confirmed he wasn't Ralph's. Enraged, Ralph's mother had squandered his salary, and their debts had only worsened. Most of Ralph's paycheck went to paying off his mother's debts, and later, he came to me in tears.
Can you waive the child support? Please. You work full-time, so you can manage without it, right? If you have any inheritance left, could you share some? We're still supposed to help each other out, right?
I hung up the call that came during my work break without listening to the end. How dare he make such an audacious request? I had my lawyer send a letter stating, if you continue to resist, we'll garnish your wages, and finally, child support were deposited into my account. Ralph and his mother had always been somewhat dependent on each other, but Ralph has recently started distancing himself due to her excessive spending. Lonely, his mother caused a big commotion by chasing him to his new condo, which ended up involving the police. Their relationship is beyond repair. With payments to Ralph's sister, Linda was overwhelmed with debt, leaving her child with her parents and working around the clock. Years of living off others' money had finally caught up with her. I no longer have to deal with Ralph or his mother's antics. Cutting ties with Ralph, I feel a great sense of relief and enjoy my days. Since our separation happened while Ralph was away, Mark doesn't fully grasp what divorce means. I've only told her that we won't be living with Daddy or seeing Grandma anymore. I'll explain everything when she starts school. For now, he's cheerful and thriving, which is a great comfort. Although Ralph and I are no longer connected, Mark still has her bond with him. If he ever wants to see him, I'll let him. From now on, I'll focus on Mark's growth and be there for his every step of the way.